Hello, everyone. Welcome to the K Touch. My name is Kay. And in this podcast, as we usually do, I'm going to be talking with someone very interesting, and at the same time, I'm going to be making some art as well. And today, I have the immense privilege of speaking with Michelle Steiner. Now, Michelle Steiner is a paraeducator. She's a writer. She's a photographer. She has a hidden disability, which she's going to be talking with us a bit about, just helping us to understand this a bit more. But she's a writer. She's published a lot of fictional work as well, a lot of writing just around disability. And she lives with her husband with two cats in Pennsylvania. Michelle, welcome to the K Touch.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about having this conversation today.
Oh, thank you so much. It's good to have you here. So I'm going to crack on with the questions, really. Who is Michelle Steiner? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, my name is Michelle Steiner. I live in Pennsylvania with my husband, Ron, our two cats, Jack and Sparrow. I am a writer, a speaker, and a photographer. I have a blog called Michelle's Mission, where I write about my life with a learning disability. And I also work with students as a paraeducator or a teacher's aide in a school. And I just find all those things that in my life, a lot of my inspiration has come from having a learning disability.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really interesting about the learning disability. The reason is because when I first came across your profile and all the really interesting things you're doing, growing up and hearing about disabilities, I had no idea about hidden disabilities. I didn't even know it was a thing until I actually encountered your profile and then really got exposed and started learning about dyscalculia and other hidden neurodisabilities. So it's really interesting that some people could grow up their whole adult life and not even encounter anything of this nature. What do you think about it? The fact that some people don't even know about this.
I get that a lot. A lot of times when I tell people I have a learning disability,
Yeah.
I get a wide variety of responses. Sometimes people will say to me, well, you don't look like you're disabled. And those are certain, and they're looking for the cane or the wheelchair.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people associate disability with. And I have to explain, well, sometimes we can't see disabilities.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times people will say, well, you're so smart. You can't have a learning disability. And learning disabilities don't necessarily affect intelligence. It's just there's one part of your brain that's just wired. Your brain is just wired differently, where I can't do things like math or things like that. And especially people who know me have always the ones who know me are always like, oh, but you've accomplished so much, you must have overcome them. And I'm like, well, I've had success in my life, but I'm always going to have a learning disability. And another really common thing that I might hear with having that is people will sometimes hear the term learning disability and they think of dyslexia. Nobody ever thinks about math difficulties, or they think I see numbers backwards.
Yep.
And then there's also the other side of the fence where people will say, oh, learning disability, that must mean you're not able to learn, and they don't have a lot of high expectations for me as well. And it's one of those things, if either extreme does little to help, it does more to hinder me.
Yeah. That's really and a lot of the things you mentioned, I must confess, were my approach to things such as hidden disabilities as well. So people would say, oh, they have a disability that's not visible, and then I'll think dyslexia. Or even with that, without even understanding fully, I would either exaggerate what it is that they're experiencing, or reduce it as though it's something that could easily be summarized. So I must say that I see the truth in that, and that must be really difficult, having to explain that constantly. So but let's talk about how you've grown up with it generally. Back in school, what kind of schools have you attended, and what was the experience growing up?
Sure. I started out going to preschool, and my preschool teachers thought something was going on, but they didn't know very much about learning disabilities. Excuse me. So she just had me go on to kindergarten, And when I was a kid, even though they wanted to hold me back, but they didn't have a lot of the services they do today. But when I was in kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher really noticed I was struggling in the classroom. I would get a dot-to-dot page and I wouldn't do it correctly.
Mm.
And I struggled with counting and tying my shoes. And it was really hard for me. And my teacher really noticed that I was having a lot of difficulty. And she recommended to my parents I get tested for having a learning disability. And sure enough, I have one. And
Wow.
the one thing they knew at that age, they didn't call it dyscalculia. They didn't know very much. It was just right after a lot of legislation was passed stating that children with disabilities had a right to public education.
Ooh.
And but the one thing that they knew was I was not going to be a mathematician when I was 5 or 6 years old. The school staff knew that pretty well. So what I ended up having to do was I had to repeat kindergarten the following year,
Mm.
and I began to receive specialty instruction in all my areas of learning. It was
Yeah.
really frustrating. Yeah, in the very beginning was so frustrating. All I wanted to do was learn like my peers and be accepted.
Yeah.
And that just didn't happen for me. I was bullied pretty early on. A lot of the groups were just really well defined, and I didn't fit in with anybody. And I just wanted to do well in school, and that was really difficult. But some things that really helped me was that books and writing. My family found out that I was really good at reading and I was really good at writing.
Mm.
And I remember when my dad found a story about a dinosaur that I wrote in second or third grade, and he said, "Wow, this is really good." And I remember hearing that, and that just was such a boost to my self-esteem. Excuse me, because I didn't think I was good at anything.
Mm.
So that became my world. Reading and writing became my world, and I was placed in more classes that involved science, social
Yeah.
studies, and then reading. And then by the time I was in high school, I was in all regular ed classes except for math and a learning support class. And then what really got difficult was socially. It was really hard for me too at that age.
Yeah,
Because
that's something I was
yeah,
really. Yeah, well, how was it really mingling and associating with peers and all of that?
that got harder as I got older because a lot of the groups were more defined and I just didn't feel like I fit in with anybody. So I found a group outside of our school district that had a writing group, and it was a nonprofit organization, and I
Mm.
found acceptance. I was able to shed that reputation of being that outcast that had followed me ever since kindergarten,
Wow.
and I met some really nice people and I had acceptance. And then after I stopped hanging out with them,
Mm.
I found a group of adults who were in a writing group, and they got to see me grow as a writer and a person. And 20 some years later, we still meet once a month to talk about our writing, and we're in each other's lives.
Wow.
And they, yeah, and they really encouraged me to write about having a learning disability. But I thought, oh no, that's too personal. I don't really want to write about that.
Mm.
And I put that aside for a number of years. And another really big difficulty I had whenever I was in high school was what I was going to do after with my adult life. I
Yeah.
knew I wanted to go to college. I knew I wanted to work with students. I knew I definitely wanted to write, but a lot of people didn't think I could do it. I had a learning support teacher who told me, "I don't think you can handle college because of your math," and suggested that I go to a trade school.
Wow.
But nothing there at the trade school interested me. And I decided I'm going to go forward and go to college. And I even had more people that discouraged me. I had a psychiatrist who told me I would most likely not go beyond community college. And when I get to community college, I had excuse me, an advisor who told me that I was going to have really limited job choices someday.
Mm.
And people thought disability accommodations were cheating. But I went ahead. Eventually, I used them after I really struggled in class. And I was able to get my associate's degree in early childhood education. And
Mm.
I had some temp jobs, and I really enjoyed working with kids and having my independence because I can't drive.
Mm.
But I always wanted more for myself.
Yeah.
And be careful, yeah, and be careful what you wish for because it might come true. And
But that's a
yeah,
good thing, actually. And you've said a few things that really caught my interest. The first is that it took a while for, first of all, there was some time for that legislation to be passed officially that people with disabilities had a
uh-huh,
right to education. And you
right,
think about this and really think well and say, how can that even be a thing to consider? You would not
right,
imagine that, because these kinds of things are basic human rights.
right,
And then also reflecting on your statement earlier on, I've heard you say it in another podcast, how people have come with the understanding, or have come to the understanding, well, some people would see people with receiving some kind of support as cheating. And
Hmm.
you just imagine, where is the humanity in any of this? The support that we should be able to give people. It doesn't put you at an unfair advantage. It just makes
Right,
you able to do what someone who has the ability to do would do. So it kind of puts you on equal, well, almost equal footing. But it's
right.
interesting. Yeah.
It really is because it puts you on the equal footing. And I was taking the almost equal footing. I was taking the same test that everybody else did when I was in school. Nobody modified anything for me. The only difference was for me was I just had extra time with that, and some
Yeah.
students had time where people read that out loud to them.
Mm.
And I think that yeah, it was the same test, still the same expectations.
Yeah.
So, and then I
Wow.
also yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. Can I ask on a personal note,
Mhm.
if you were ever bullied in school, did you experience any bullying?
Yes, I did. When I was really young, it was, well, you're not my friend, or you're not invited to my birthday party, or I don't want to play with you on the playground. But when I got older, it became more, well, I don't want you to sit at the lunch table, and
Wow.
I'm not your friend, and I don't want you to. And sometimes it even got to be some threats. And
Wow.
I was really lucky that the people that were threatening me were not serious about
Yeah,
anything.
yeah, yeah.
And I remember seeing somebody that was a couple years older than I was, and he said, "You know, that I was talking about somebody picking on me." He goes, "I think that person's just blowing smoke,"
Wow.
and she was had all these threats. And I looked at her one day, and I just said, "Oh, that's nice," and I walked away. And I'll never forget the shocked look on her face. And yeah,
Wow.
and that was one of those things. I mean, yes, if someone's picking on you and really harassing you, you
Yeah.
should be reporting it, definitely. But
Mm.
I definitely had a lot of that. And I
Mhm.
also just had a lot of social skills where a lot of people didn't want to be my friend or pretended like they were, and they weren't. But what really helped me to identify whether somebody was being nice to me or somebody was trying to be mean is
Mm.
when I finally had that experience of being accepted.
Yeah.
And what that taught me was, okay, this is how someone that is your friend and does like you is to treat you, and this is how someone who isn't your friend does that as well.
Yeah. So what role did you how in key what was the support you received from your parents at that early age in helping you to adjust to the disability?
It was really important. My mom and dad never gave up on me. They
Mm.
explained to me what my disability was from a very young age, and they told me that I had a learning disability and my brain learned differently.
Mm.
A lot of times parents don't want to label their child, but what I was hearing when I was in school was more of that I wasn't smart. But when my parents told me that, that is what really stuck with me throughout a
Mm.
lot of those difficult years.
Mm.
And I also had friends that were very supportive that helped me out with that. And I had teachers who educated my family on what my disability was and ways
Mm.
to help me, and everybody worked together. And
Yeah.
if I didn't have that support system, I don't think I would be as successful as I am today.
Yes, we're going to come to a lot of the things that you've been able to achieve with that. So you attended Slippery Rock University, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
How was it studying there?
It was wonderful. I
Mhm.
had a much better experience than I did at community college.
Mm.
I I was a couple years older by that point. I also moved back in with my parents, and I wasn't working, so I had that time to devote to being a student.
Yeah.
I found a program that had the least amount of math and science possible, which was a good thing for me. And it had a program that I loved and had disability accommodations. And this time, when I just went forward and I used them, I advocated for myself. I
Yeah.
said, yeah. And there
Because
was
I
always
heard you say on a podcast once that you actually approached lecturers and teachers to say this is
yes,
exactly where I would need extra support in learning.
exactly. I did that. I would tell them that these are the services that I'm using with the Office for Students with Disabilities, and most of them got it and wanted to help. I got a couple that didn't get the memo, but at that point, I was old enough to kind of figure that out. That okay, that didn't really matter as much,
Mm.
and that was just another big thing too. There was
Yeah.
always going to be people that didn't think I was trying hard enough, or the accommodations were cheating, or they wish they had them. And you're always going to hear that. But I
Yeah.
learned at that age that I just had to kind of ignore that
Yeah.
and go forward with what I wanted to do. And it was such a better experience. My grades improved dramatically. I made Dean's List for a semester. And I was able to get a bachelor's degree despite being told I couldn't do it.
That's amazing, and it recalls reminds me of a friend I had, but his friend, his
Mhm,
he I have, yeah, I still maintain contact with him.
mhm,
His disability was more or is more physical, and
uh-huh,
there were considerations in terms of allocating accommodation to him on the
mhm.
university campus, and it was the same kind of. Even though his disability was so evident to everyone, you would still hear people making side comments and
Yeah,
how such positions put him at an advantage. But because I was so close to him, I could clearly see that there was no advantage. It was just helping him to achieve what he needed to achieve. But
right,
that you do say something also importantly about advocating for yourself, because it's, but sadly it's not everyone who would have that confidence to do so.
right.
And but it's really, I'm really happy you were able to identify in uni what kind of support you needed and actually speak to ensure you got it. Hmm.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yes.
But let's now talk about a bit about photography and
Yes.
how you got into that space. Was it just one of those things? I interviewed someone recently who, whilst growing up, her parents tried to see what interest stuck with her. And they tried loads of things, and all of a sudden they gave her watercolor, and it was painting that stuck for her. So how did you
That's
get introduced to photography?
It was really interesting. I remember I was at prom and I took a picture of a tree at our venue,
Hmm.
and all my peers said, "Well, why did you take a picture of that tree?" And I was showing one of the older women in our writing group the picture, and she
Hmm.
pointed it out and she said, "Ah, this shows perspective." And
Ooh.
for years, I fought everybody. I thought I put that on the shelf. I didn't take a lot of pictures. I thought I am not an artist. I cannot draw a straight line. I can't do any of this stuff. And that may be true. I may not be the best at drawing or freehand or sketching,
Hmm.
but for years I just kind of put that on the shelf and thought, okay, I'm not an artist. Okay, I can write, but that's about it.
Hmm.
Until my husband and I were at a wedding and we went to a cemetery. We took some pictures
Hmm.
of these angels. And I had another friend who saw the pictures and said, wow, these are amazing.
Hmm.
And this was not a friend that just gave out compliments.
Hmm.
You really, I mean, she was particular. So I thought, well, if she likes it, I must have done something right. So I put them in an art, yeah, an art show, and I got honorable mention. And
Hmm.
that just sparked an interest in me. I was like, oh, I want to do more of this. So I would start taking pictures of things, entering them into shows, and then I would put them on social media. And
Wow.
people would comment, you're bringing out the details of a flower that I miss.
Hmm.
And I started to realize I'm not able to drive because of my disability. But what I do when I'm on my walks is I take pictures of flowers and other things.
Yeah.
And rather than being really sad about, oh, I can't drive, I have to walk somewhere, I get that chance to take those pictures of flowers. And if I didn't have that opportunity, that's just something I would miss in life.
Yeah. That's really interesting that that just came. And because you miss a lot of things. Well, people miss things. You could,
Mhm,
escape. You could just take a walk and pass a bunch of flowers, pass some
mhm,
statues, and you just miss out on how beautiful they are. I mean, in this small town that I am, I keep telling people how I
mhm,
love the town that I am in. It's just a small town in Andover
mhm,
in the United Kingdom, and I keep telling people how beautiful it is and how I just want to walk
mhm.
by it. And people just say, "Oh no, it's crap." And it's really interesting how some humans could miss out on beauty just because they're focused on something else. But I have seen some of the pictures you've taken, and I'm honestly really just amazed by it. And so, but you've obviously grown in your skill since you took
Mhm.
your first picture. So what has helped with that? Have you gone through any formal training for photography or?
I have not gone through formal training. For me,
Hmm.
it's just been trial and error.
Oh,
It's just been going in and I take pictures and some of them turn out really good. And those are the ones that I work and I work on and I make them better and
yeah.
I post those and then sometimes I get them back. Sometimes I look at them and they're blurry or they're off center or
Mm.
off focus. And I don't post those. But it's never, it's always learning. And sometimes
Yeah.
my husband has taught me, okay, maybe you might want to try taking a shot from this angle, or you might want to try this, or I might ask him, oh, how do you
Mm,
think we could do this? But
mm.
a lot of it is just learning and throughout myself and being self-taught for a lot of that stuff
Oh,
too. And then
wow.
just learning and growing and seeing how things work.
Yeah. And so what's your favorite thing to take pictures of? Is it because I want to know how you what goes through your mind when you decide to take an image? Is it just, oh, this looks nice. Let's see how it appears when I take a picture of it, or do you go out and look for particular things?
Take pictures of his flowers. I've always loved flowers. That is one of my favorite things, especially with spring coming up with the flowers blooming.
Mm,
And I've been in my neighborhood for a number of years, so I
yeah.
have that chance to know what flowers are coming up. And
Yeah.
then my second favorite is taking pictures of butterflies. I
Oh,
just
okay.
love that transformation. I love the colors. I love the beauty of them.
Mm.
And that's always something nice when summertime comes and I get a chance to take some pictures of a butterfly.
Yeah, I actually, when I was preparing for this interview, I said, "Oh yes, Michelle actually loves taking pictures of flowers," and it just coincided, just like you were talking. My mind also went to spring, and I was like, "Yeah, this would be really beautiful. She would be in her element as far as I'm concerned."
Yes, exactly. That's what I love.
So, so you go on regular walks. Can you tell me, and you take pictures when you see them? Has there been any particular images that has left a kind of lasting impression on you? Something that you would look at and just have a deeper reflection over, or is it? Yeah.
I think there's a couple things. There, one time my husband and I were walking in the city, and on a bridge, on a yellow bridge was a pink rose
No.
on a walk.
Mm.
And I took a picture of that. And that's just not something I would see every day. And that just left that impression of just that wonder and that beauty,
Hmm.
that surprise, because I
Yes.
never know when I go out everything I'm going to see if it's a new neighborhood. But even if it is that, there's always something that's out there. It's blooming, it's changing. And
Yes.
that has really changed a perspective of mine of just looking for those details, looking for those things and just finding them and finding ways to capture that. I
Yes.
remember my dad, whenever I was younger, he liked this poem that I didn't write the poem, but there was a poem that I read
Mm.
at a funeral. And he said that writer really captured details, and that's somebody that notices things. And there's different ways I can notice things in my writing and make and express that, but I
Mm.
can also do that with my photography.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can just be an easier way too to capture that right in those couple of minutes, or
Yep.
even seconds.
Yep. That's really true, and it's interesting. Like I said, people could miss a lot of things.
Mhm.
But I'm glad that there's someone like you to bring these things to life. So, what do you, in your impression, I mean, you've been taking photographs for a long time. What makes a good photographer?
Photographer is number one, noticing details. That's always important, and bringing
Hmm.
out that beauty in a situation.
Yeah.
And I think it's also being humble as well to know that whenever you get behind the camera, you get behind the lens, you don't know if that picture is going to turn out good, or if
Yeah.
you don't know if it's may not turn how you expect it to be. And sometimes things turn out better, and sometimes things don't always turn out how we want them to. So I think it's
Yeah.
staying humble,
Yeah.
and it's also just looking to see what your subject is trying to teach you.
Mm, okay. And then I let's talk a bit about your writing. I've read just a small part of it, and it's
Mhm.
quite unique, quite interesting how you're able to capture. I think I can't remember what it is that I read recently. It was I think a collection of different stories by different
Mhm.
writers.
Yes.
And your expression about your background and how you've grown up as well. With your writing, how have you honed in that skill and been able to represent your thoughts clearly like that?
One of the things I love to do is I like to do a lot of nature metaphors. So I might talk about the process of accepting my disabilities like a flower that's blooming.
Hmm.
So I try to make that and do those nature references as well. And
Yeah.
I try to make information very clear, especially to people that might have disabilities, so they can look at that and say, oh, that's my life, or that's my story. Or they might have a different experience too. I know everybody experiences it
Things
differently.
differently, yeah.
But I also want to give clarity out to maybe people who don't understand what learning disabilities are and put
Mm,
them in some terms they can understand and do some analogies with that.
mm,
But I think the big thing was having that courage to finally share about that. My first time I shared about it is they found out I had limited hand dexterity as an adult. And when my
mm.
husband and I moved into our home, I could not unlock the front door.
Oh,
So I was so frustrated, and there was a call on the Mighty right about a seemingly easy task for other people, but it's really hard with your disability. And I finally got the courage to write about that. And someone very wise told, and it got published. And I had a lot of people that said, "Well, that's my story," and that just
mm.
encouraged me to write other things.
But what
And
do you
I'm
think
very,
it came from? Um, you said you summoned up the courage, and I know it was a journey you
Mhm.
were on. But what do you think that initial restriction and that what do you think you had to overcome to be able to share this?
I think I had to overcome what other people were going to think of me
Hmm.
and that acceptance that I wanted to have because it's a privilege that I have that I don't have to share with everybody that I
Yeah.
have a disability.
Yeah.
But sometimes that can be really hard because then people will just expect me to be able to do everything. And the
Hmm.
truth is I can't do
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And then they don't know why because it doesn't show why I can't do certain things. So
Hmm.
I think it was that. And I thought a lot of times I wanted to hide that for so many years because it
Hmm.
was I viewed it as such a negative thing. I thought that having one was a negative connotation and, oh, if somebody finds that out, they're not going to like you. And that was a big
Oh,
shameful secret.
yeah.
And the thing is, once I finally started sharing it, I found more people were drawn to that because that was something that they were familiar with, or they knew somebody, or they were curious about what life is like for somebody that has one.
Hmm.
And also, this gives people the space to be vulnerable and share their own experiences as
That's
well.
exactly what I was actually
Hmm.
alluding to as well, because hearing you share that, it just, I mean, you're just someone with a hidden disability, but with
Yeah.
humans generally, we all have aspects of ourselves that we
Hmm.
feel are not worthy of
Yep.
being shared. We don't want to be vulnerable. We want people to see the superhuman. We want people to see that aspect that we feel should be celebrated, and that's all we
Right.
want to share. So thanks a lot for really, it's good to know that it's like you've given yourself that permission to be vulnerable and just put yourself out there. And to be honest, if anyone doesn't like it, it doesn't matter. It's
Yeah. Exactly.
hmm, that's really interesting. So tell us a bit about, because we've talked about your
Hmm.
writing, we've talked a bit about your photography as well. I know you're a paraeducator. What's that experience like, working with people with disabilities as well?
It is really rewarding to be able to work with another person that has a disability, especially at that young age.
Hmm.
As I said, everybody experiences disabilities differently, but I do find a lot of similarities in what I hear my students say. And sometimes it's like hearing me a recording of myself at that age. I hate my individual education plan. I
Hmm.
wish I didn't have a disability.
Yeah.
And I get to be that voice to say it's okay it's okay that you have a disability. It's all right
Hmm.
to have that plan in place. And I get to
Hmm.
show them how to advocate. And sometimes we might have a student that might be afraid, but I get to tell them now, come on, this is how we do this. And they
Hmm.
learn everything with how to speak up for themselves. And I think
Yeah.
that's so important. And I think it's also it's also humility as well. I
Yeah.
cannot help them with math. And I tell the kids, I am not able to help you with math. I can help you with anything else, but not that. And I really think, yes, I will get occasionally a kid that'll say, "Can you help me with my math?" After I've said that, and I've given to that. I'm just at that point where it doesn't bother me. It's just who I am. But I also think that that's important that our students know that because
Yeah.
a lot of them might have a math disability. Some of them they need to know that everybody has something in life that they struggle with,
Yes.
and it's okay to struggle with something, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to have limits as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It is very okay, and I think like you said, because they're such a young age,
Hmm.
it's all about learning how to accept themselves for who they
Yeah.
are and not be too
Hmm.
worried about sharing it and what
Yep.
people will think about them. So how long have you been a paraeducator for?
I have been with the district for over 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And I've done some sub jobs before
Mm,
with that as well too. So yeah.
wow. So what do you think about the support that's generally available, at least in your area, for people with hidden disabilities? Is it possible to compare it from what it was before? And what do you think in terms of the end game? Is it there yet, or is there still something that's needed?
I think that they've made some improvements. We have a lot more early intervention programs for students than we did in the past.
Hmm.
If a student would come in preschool, or even before they go to preschool, there's a lot of birth to three services, a lot of preschools that handle students with disabilities. I think
Yeah.
that is something that we're much better on identifying
Hmm.
now. And I think that that's definitely something that has that. I think sometimes it can be really hard for a student that is going through our schools to have someone that understands what that's like,
Yeah.
because that I think sometimes people might think, oh, the person, they just have to think positively or they
Yeah.
can do whatever they put their mind to, and it's
Yeah. I'm
I could
guilty of
sometimes,
that. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, and it's not yeah, it's not a bad thing either,
Yeah.
but it's just one of, yeah. So I think some of those can. I think sometimes a lot of the programs that are available also don't really customize what everybody needs, and they want to try to lump everybody together
Together.
in a box, and that just doesn't work, especially whenever somebody gets out into the real world. A lot of the programs, there's not as many of them, and the ones that they do have are really geared maybe towards someone that has an intellectual disability
Hmm.
and not someone that has a learning disability. So sometimes people don't always know what support services are out there
Yep.
too.
Yep.
So
Yep. I think
that would
that
be,
that challenge of just
yeah.
lumping people together is a real
Mhm.
a real significant one, because there's that assumption that everybody has that same need,
Yeah.
and it's not always the
Mhm.
case. It's not always
Exactly.
the case. So we've gone to a good part of the interview. I just wanted to know what your general advice would be for people with disabilities, especially people at a young age. If there's anyone who's watching this, what is that one thing that Michelle would want them to know?
Know is that it's possible to be able to go out and achieve your dreams with a disability, that
Mm,
success is possible.
yeah,
It might come in a different package that you expect, but it is definitely a possibility. And sometimes it even turns out even better than you thought. And to just go out for your dreams and to go out for what you want to do, and to just be able to look for the services and the supports that are out there as well.
yeah. Yeah. So what now we've talked about all of these
Mhm.
things that you've got going on. Um, what else does Michelle do when she's not saving the world? When she's not an advocate, when she's not taking pictures? Is there any other thing, any other interest that you have?
Love to read. That is definitely something I love to do. That I've always been a big reader. I like to work out. I like to go to the gym.
Yeah.
And my husband and I together, we really love to travel. We love going to new places
Yeah.
and just going to get to see different things.
Do you have any books that you can recommend in particular?
I like Learning Outside the Lines by Jonathan Moody
Okay.
or Mooney. He is
Mhm.
that is a really good one where that's somebody's experience with having a learning
All
disability.
right. Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, Michelle, honestly, it's great to have you talk about this. And like I said, this is why it's really important that people share their stories and
Mhm.
and create this awareness, because honestly, I wouldn't have known about it. So thanks a lot for taking out the time to come and speak with us. But now I usually do something at the end of every conversation, which is to show the art that I have been making. It's not
Okay.
complete because every single time is
Mhm.
different. But I have been able to make something that I wanted to share it.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. So whilst we were having a conversation, what I was able to make, aha, right.
Ooh, I
So
love
these,
that.
so I made you some tulips.
That
And
is beautiful.
so I wanted to reflect something having to do with spring, and obviously, it's not showing too clearly, but also your love for flowers. So I'm going to tidy this up,
Okay.
and I am going to name them. I'm not telling you what I'm naming these yet.
Okay.
I'm going to tidy these up, and I'm going to get these sent across to you, because you
Cool.
are really an amazing person, and hearing your story and what you've overcome and how you're helping people with their own struggles as well is really something inspiring and worth celebrating.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, same here, Michelle. So what is in the future? What is in the cards for Michelle?
I'd like to write a book someday about my life with having a learning disability. And I want to call it Chasing Butterflies, and going through a transformation process of
Oh,
butterflies that a butterfly goes through, and the transformation I've gone through as well.
oh, wow. Well, I'm looking forward to that. I hope that once that, well, I'm already booking you in for that. Once you've written
Okay,
that in, I would like to have you here so we can talk a bit more about it.
sure.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us. We really appreciate the time. And to everyone who's out there, there you have it, Michelle sharing with us about hidden disabilities and how you can really make the most out of life and not let it hold you down. Thank you so much again, Michelle. And I'll see the rest of you next time we're on.